is gonna take Cracker Jack timing, Wang.
Total concentration. You ready, Jack?
I was born ready.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. Got a couple of special guests here today. I think this is the first time you guys have been on the channel together, but these two have worked together in the past. I believe at Boom Kids when Aaron was the lead editor and Jesse was writing the Toy Story line. Obviously, we got Jesse Blaze Snyder from the YouTubes, from your Pizza Hut commercial. He's been on Food Network. He writes comic books. He's a man of many trades. How you doing, Jesse?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Wes.
So you can be honest with me. Aaron was a crappy editor and boss, right?
Aaron was the greatest editor that I have ever had. And I say that with such love in my heart. You know, a lot of times I don't think people's motivations are exactly right. You know, I think we spoke about one of the last times I was on about, you know, a lot of superficial thinking within the executives at various companies. And I went to Aaron and I just basically gushed about how much I love the Muppets because they had just gotten the Muppet license. And I was like, listen, I love the Muppets and I've seen them done poorly a lot of times. I've seen them mishandled, and I really would just love to be given an opportunity to write the Muppets the way they deserve to be written. And, and unlike so many, he just responded to my love and passion for the material and how I was interested in honoring that material. And at the time, the Muppets weren't available. So he offered me some Toy Story, which, to me, Toy Story was a ripoff of the Christmas toy from Jim Henson Productions. But I was
also the Brave Little Toaster.
Yes, that too. But I was a huge Pixar fan. So when he said Toy Story, I, sat down and I'm a big toy guy. And I came up with a pitch, for him. And then he and I eventually would just bond even further because as it turned out, Aaron was a big toy guy. And we literally walked around a comic convention one day and I was like mentioning little things and he's mentioning little things. And I'm like, turned to him and I went, wait a second, you speak toy? and we've been best friends ever since.
It was that Step Brothers moment of like, did we just become best friends? Yup. And we went and did karate in the garage.
So obviously you guys are still friends to this day. We're going to talk about an interesting thing here. Now, Aaron, as the lead editor of the kids line at Boom Kids, where you're overseeing obviously Jesse's work on Toy Story and other places, I imagine one of the things that you had to keep in mind as you were taking these pitches in, not only do these pitches honor the characters, are they relevant today, but do they make money? That's got to be the bottom line at the end of it. If you're telling a story and there's no audience for it, like what story are you really telling?
I'll tell you the interesting thing that happened, and it was in reference to Jesse's Toy Story, because Jesse coming on to Toy Story, when I inherited the Boom Kids line, it was in a state of disarray. They had done too much too fast. They had pushed stuff into the pipeline way faster than Disney Publishing wanted. Disney Publishing builds in a certain amount of time that you have with the license to get things in the can, because obviously they understand there's going to be approvals. You're going to have to make revisions. So let's do 6 months worth of, material, like kind of get it in the can in the pipeline before you go to solicitations. That way we're never under the gun. And Boom didn't do that. Boom immediately announced titles that weren't even in production yet. It was just, we're going to do these things. So when Jesse came on to Toy Story, it was the first chance that I had to really work with the writer and say, let's do this right. Jesse came in, he was like, I love Pixar. And I was like, that's good, because what I want these comics to be is I want them to be feel every bit as important as the films. I want them to resonate in the same ways. I want to, have them hit that same bar where it's like, there's things in them that adults can enjoy, but if they share them with their kids, there's plenty of things that the kids are going to get too. And yeah. Jesse understood that.
Yeah, well, that was totally my interest as well at the time too. Like a lot of things hadn't come out, yet, and it was really like Pixar's track record was so pristine, and like the idea of like doing some material additional to the pristine track record that they had, it really seemed like necessary. Like we got this license, let's make sure we make the most of it, and we don't tank the great thing they got going.
What we couldn't have known is that our ambition to do that was going to cause some problems for other elements of Pixar. Like, for example, Jesse brought in Booster from Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. So we had a little story to tell with Booster, and he was eventually going to get written out because the story took place between Toy Story 1 and 2, and eventually we were going to get to Toy Story 2 continuity, and we were going to write him out so that it all fit seamlessly. But it was all these supposed to be the moments in between. And then we did Jesse had an idea for the Council of Buzz Lightyears. You know, when they go to the toy store, there's a bunch of, buzzes. And I said, you know how they make those crappy Batman figures where it's like you go to buy Batman, but you can't get the regular Batman because the shelves are full of laser luge Batman and, all those variants. What if the buzzes are like that? So Jesse came up with all these like crazy buzzes, and we were really having a good time with it. What we couldn't have known was Mattel had the Pixar toy license, and they had been trying to do variations of the characters for years. And Pixar always said, no, just stick to what's in the films. When the comics came out, all of a sudden Mattel had a hold of them and was going to Pixar and saying, can we do this ninja Buzz? Can we do this cowboy Buzz? Can we do all these, like the space cowboy Buzz? All these variations that we had in the comics. And the guy that was in charge of the toy approvals was like, oh my God, what's happening? So we had to have this big meeting, and it was kind of a mess. We had to like change things on the fly. And since Boom had started us so far under the gun, it was just a nightmare of revisions and long nights trying to fix these nonsensical kind of like notes that we were getting. This Buzz toy that's supposed to be future Buzz, he can't have a beard because toys don't grow facial hair. And it's like, but it's not facial hair. It's a plastic beard that's on the toy. That's like, meant to reflect something that happened on the the fictional Buzz Lightyear show.
Yeah, it was actually a reference to the finale of Star Trek, All Good Things, where everybody was old. And I was like, so they would do an episode where it's old Buzz, and like here's the toy, but nobody wants it. Like, that was really the thing. Like, it was all the bad suggestions. Because the Ninja Turtles line had gotten insane with variants at some point, where there was like a party clown Michelangelo, and you were just
there's the WWF variants. You have like the Rock Turtle, and you have the Undertaker Turtle.
Yeah, so that's what we were playing with. Well, what happened was then I got called into the office because there's obviously these problems with Toy Story, and I remember Ross Ritchie telling me. He's like, well, what's going on with this? And I said, well, we're shooting for the moon, and there's just like some growing pains. We're trying to like make this line successful and make people, want to buy it and get excited about it. And we want to have that same feel as Pixar. And so we're being really ambitious. And I was told this license is a license to print money. It doesn't matter what story you tell. It has Buzz and Woody in it. You could have them sitting on a curb for 22 pages, just having a conversation, and people will buy it because it's Pixar. And that was the first time I realized you guys don't care about this license. This is just a money grab. This is just being able to go in and fan a bunch of Pixar books out on some executive's desk, that you're pitching a movie to for one of your properties and saying, look, Pixar trusted us to, like they sought us out to make these comics, which was never true. Pixar really didn't want comics to be made, and they kind of had to roll with it. And they were good partners, for their part in making them. We later had some meetings and ironed some things out. And if I had stayed with Boom, I think that the line would have ultimately been very successful. But it was one of those moments where it was, that was only we need to make money. But the belief was that the line would just make money based on its name. And I think that that's kind of the problem that you have with like current Star Wars leadership since Lucas sold it, is that the idea was that it doesn't matter what you put out, it's going to make money because it's Star Wars. And that's not the case. There has to be quality. The bottom line should be sales, because that's what keeps everybody employed. That's what keeps the line going. But ultimately, the way that you get sales is your story has to be good. It has to be engaging. People have to enjoy it. So when you come and you pitch a story, what is the story is the most important thing. Not what demographic are we going after? What headline are we trying to get for a temporary one-issue sales bump? What's the long-term plan that's going to keep this financially viable?
Well, that's so funny how it's flip-flop, because I've said this before, just superficial decision-making from the top is and always has been the problem in all of the creative entertainment industries. Most choices are made following trends and not, whatever, it was for forever. Ike Perlmutter was going, women don't sell movies. Black people don't sell movies. We're not going to make a Black Panther. We're not going to make a Black Widow. That was wrong at the time, and and now everybody knows it's wrong. But now everybody's going, well, how do we get free clicks and free advertising on the internet? We need to do something new that's never been done before, that plays to the social media climate, so that people are automatically sharing a thing. Except that doesn't do anything in terms of selling books. That does get clicks on articles. That does, because it engages people who might be upset by it as much as it engages people who are interested in it, which is a really false sort of metric when you're looking at that. Like, oh, wow, look at how many people clicked on this article. Well, people who would be annoyed would click on the article as much as people who would actually like it and be engaged with it. And, there is always a balance. Just playing to, oh, well, we got Star Wars and now we're making money. Oh, we got Toy Story and we're making money. That's not enough to maintain a thing. It might be enough to get that casual person to like buy a comic book for their kid. But if you want to maintain and grow a market and grow an audience and have people coming back, you actually have to do something that is going to appeal to that demographic, that is interested in the book. And generally speaking, what you are doing to sell books is you're playing and building upon what has already been established. Taking a big right turn, that tends not to do the trick, because that's like oh, well, how are they going to do that based on everything that's come before that I've read? I don't even want to know. That tends to be the reaction more so when you make a quick turn than when you pitch something that's building upon the status quo that is already there. People want to see the wheel get turned to the right, but they first want to know that it's going to be coming from the place that they've already invested their time and their money and their interest in. And then they're shocked and surprised and happy when you're like, oh, wow, they did it a new way. But you can't just pitch the new way that you're going to do it. You have to pitch it on the tried and true, and then include your, pitch and your take on these things, as caveats and extra little bits that make it interesting and make it worth talking about beyond the fact that it already is something that plays largely to what you had in mind.
What's interesting, Aaron, is with building on what Jesse's talking about there, if you just do something for the shock factor or the value of getting the headline, you make a large scale change to the character or the lore, but there's no substance behind it. There's no long-term planning. You're essentially making like a tchotchke, right? It's a one and done unique item that inherently has no value to it, right?
Well, there's just nowhere to go with certain things.
Yeah, the comic book is supposed to be an entry point for the story, but you have these kind of ideas that really, it feels like that's the exit point as well, because you get the one to say that you did it, and then you're out of the hobby.
Yeah, well, and then there's nothing. Yeah, there's just nowhere to go with some of these ideas. Superman, Son of Kal-El, where it's like they're getting a lot of media attention for bringing Jonathan Kent out as bisexual, which, of course, in comics means he's going to be gay. He's never going to date a woman again. But because then you're going to get the same Twitter people that you're trying to appeal to with this, that same audience. If you do anything except make him in a gay relationship, if you put him in a heterosexual relationship, because technically he's bisexual, you're going to have those people freak out and they're going to lose their minds. They're not buying the comic, but they're going to lose their minds and they're going to attack you on Twitter. And that's why this is just like a minefield to walk. So now what can you do interesting with Jonathan Kent? You have to be very careful, because as we saw with Leah Williams, who is an LGBT writer and who writes LGBT characters, when she killed one of them off, she got accused of being a homophobe and being, she had all these people attacking her. And it's like, when you take that, this is why I never agreed with Gail Simone's women in refrigerators argument, because yes, to an extent, there was a lot of that going on where, the love interest was being placed in peril, but that's just fiction. That's just one of the tropes of fiction. And if you have a female protagonist, if you're writing Carol Danvers, and I don't know why you
put her boyfriend in a refrigerator.
Yeah, exactly.
Brody?
The threat, the threat has to be that this identity, this life that you're living, could come back and affect the people that you love. At any moment, Peter Parker could come home and find Aunt May stuffed in a refrigerator. There's that threat. What you were doing could have ramifications for your family. And when you take that out of the toolbox because of some kind of political correctness or because you're afraid of offending people on Twitter, you've hampered yourself, and you've, like Donald Glover said, there's not anything coming out right now that's interesting. Everybody's too afraid to write anything interesting because they're afraid they're going to get attacked by this cancel culture mob.
I just want to say the worst part about that is that it's really racist. And what do you say when you're being discriminatory against gays? They're gay is not a fucking story point. It's not a talking point. That's just is. That is just an isness of their life. It's nothing to promote. It's nothing to hang your fucking hat on. And when superficial executives and editors are thinking that it is, you lose the prize. The prize is what is happening story-wise. What is growing this character? What is changing them and making them tick? Who they want to put their penis into or not put their penis into, that is neither here nor there. And I liked it so much more when we weren't really focused on that. I understand that, yes, a lot of times the boyfriend, girlfriend was like, but it was just sort of a ancillary part of the character's book. Mary Jane and what was going on in her life was not affecting Spider-Man's stories. Spider-Man's stories was affecting Spider-Man's life. And Spider-Man's life, he could be gay, it wouldn't matter. If Mary Jane was Marco Jacob, it doesn't fucking change any of the stories that I've read over the years. One iota at all. It doesn't fucking change any Spider-Man story. The Spider-Man story is about what's happening to him and how it might affect his life, how it might affect him. And the fact that he's got a boyfriend or a girlfriend doesn't enter into the equation. So to make it such your focus, it just takes away what's happening to Spider-Man that should interest me? His sex life shouldn't be the thing. Superman's sex life shouldn't be the thing. And the moment it is, we're watching the CW and a soap opera. We're no longer reading superhero comic books. And I don't read Archie. You know, there's a small market for that people read Archie. And we want to find out what's going on with Archie and Jughead and Betty and Veronica. I don't give a shit about that. So adding in that drama to a comic book that isn't about that, it just really just diverges the train from the tracks.
Well, you could tell. I mean, I think that there's interesting stories to be told. I think that I think Young Justice, which I am a writer on season 4 of Young Justice. For anybody who doesn't know, hey. But no, I think that that handles characters with different sexualities really well. I don't think it comes off as ham-fisted. I think that it just comes off as kind of natural. This is just a thing that is. This is just kind of the world we live in. This character happens to be gay. It's not the most important thing about them, just like it's not the most important thing about Nightwing that he's straight. You know, that it's just what is. What matters is the moral character of a hero and the situations that they're in and the stories that we're telling with them. And these other things are side things that you can handle maturely and you can handle in a way that I think is more just edifying for everybody. Because I thought the goal was that we wanted to think of these things as not being abnormal, not being, something that to be stared and gawked at. But we're making it that with the marketing. And when that becomes the only thing, and then you're afraid of the people that you've put it out there to appeal to, you're afraid of them because if you upset them in any particular way, these weirdos on Twitter, they're going to come for you and call you all these names and get you fired and you're going to lose your livelihood and things like that. It just makes for fiction and for the idea of telling these stories, even stories that involve LGBTQ characters. Yeah, it just makes it impossible to do anything.
It's not a defining characteristic. Your race is not a defining characteristic. It has become so when it is politicized and it is made about there being some sort of problem with people being gay or some sort of problem with somebody being a race other than white. But there's not. And people have been pitching, white writers have been pitching great stories featuring women and featuring, diverse races forever and being shot down by the executive editors in charge and the film producers in charge who've changed that lead character to a male, who've changed that lead character to white because in their mind at the time, it didn't make dollars and cents. But this is what I mean. Now, all of a sudden the pendulum shifts and now you could have just started coloring Wally West black. It doesn't change any of the stories unless you're superficially minded and you're like, Wally West is black enough. He's black now. So that has to enter into the story in some way. Why does that enter into the story? In the idealistic world of the superheroes, we're not dealing in a world of these people having problems with race. If a black guy is running around the city, solving crimes, saving everybody, everybody's generally going to be pretty good with that guy. And he doesn't have to deal with any of that stuff. He could just be a different color and it wouldn't matter. But that's not what they do. They make these changes and then they keep sort of forcing and how does this change the story? It doesn't. It shouldn't. If it changes the story because you think so, you are behaving in a racist and discriminatory manner that is suggesting that there's anything different between a white person and a black person. There isn't, other than some of the circumstances that are sometimes dealt with. But not everybody, thankfully, has to deal with those circumstances. And it really is just unfortunate the way these things are turned into something much more complex than they are and need to be. And I think the best way to do away with racism and discrimination is to present everybody on an equal playing field. But they don't do that. They change the thing and then they go, all right, how does this make them different? And really shouldn't.
You know what's interesting, Jesse, is you can add these aspects into a story, and it actually can make the story more compelling.
You can add layers.
You mentioned Archie earlier. How I don't read Archie, but if you go back and you read Amazing Spider-Man, you essentially were reading Archie. You had Peter Parker, you had MJ, you had Gwen Stacy, and
Betty Brant, or who's the person who worked at the desk in the journals, but he was always in love triangles and stuff.
They essentially
but
created
they were
Archie
aspects to a story, not the full meal.
It was a compliment to the Spider-Man story to add some more layers to it. And it accentuated and made the story better. But if you only made it about that and you remove the part about great responsibility, in the sacrifice that Spider-Man is, it's no longer a superhero comic. And I think that's kind of where we're getting to, Aaron, was where the stories aren't about morality tales. They're not about overcoming the odds. It's what social political issue can we talk about today using our character, as a sounding board.
But when people use those things as platforms, they really get it wrong. Aaron was telling us a story earlier about a gay friend of his who brought him to like a cross-dressing bar or whatever to try to tell him that he was gay. And Aaron's like, I knew you were gay. He's like, but you didn't treat me any differently. And Aaron said, of course I didn't treat you any differently. It doesn't matter that you're gay. And that's the introduction of gay characters of any variety or other race into comic books when they are not treated any differently. It's when Captain America is partnered with the Falcon and he doesn't treat him any differently. It's not an issue. It doesn't come up. That is what teaches us these proper values, by making it like it's a big deal, by making it like there's this cesspool of evil people who are trying to stop the people. No, man, the system is systemically been stifling diversity forever. Not the individuals living in the system. The system is gerrymandering and looking at numbers and trying to get their demographics to vote for their political party, not the people. So blaming it on the people and making it all about the people and not focusing on how the system is corrupt is just a misfire. You're like, I'm going to get bang, and you shoot the guy next to you instead of shooting the thing that is actually doing the damage. Sorry, Aaron.
No, I was enjoying your rant. But I forgot what the question was, Wes.
Well, let's take it, Aaron, to what's sort of the genesis of this. The other day you were talking about some of these pitches and going like, why, what is going to sell these books?
Yeah, it was specifically in reference to, I had commented on Wes's video about Superman, Son of Kal-El. And I said, but my question as the editor, if this was pitched to me is, the shorthand was, I've explained it in greater terms on the channel before, but the shorthand was, how does this improve sales? Would be my question. Now that's shorthand for what is the actual story here? Where is this going? How does this keep people engaged? How does this keep people buying comics? How does this keep entertaining people? Because once you stop entertaining people, people go, and they fall off and they stop buying. So sales is shorthand for, how is this entertaining? How does this retain readership? What exciting stories can you spin out of this decision? How does this make us money?
Sales also equals the audience that is already there. How does this appeal to the audience that is already there? How does this bring them back? In addition to bringing in some new you can bring in a new audience all you want, but if you don't bring back the established audience, you're not servicing the character of the book or the company.
Yes, and so the question that I got, like one of the responses that I got into a debate with, is someone said, how sad it must be to see artistic expression as nothing more than a vessel to make money. Not every feature of a story needs to be engineered to make money. And I responded, stories need to resonate with people so that they buy it and want more. Artistic expression, when being solicited as a consumer good, which is what comics are, they are a consumer good, they are a product, it needs to meet or exceed the audience's expectation in order to continue to exist. And then I said, if you want artistic expression without commercial expectations, comics aren't for you. Go join a beat poetry group.
make your own comic book, on your blog or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then,
Some people
it's like
do
you're not
that.
interested in making money. You're just putting it out for free. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But Marvel, DC, these are publishers that are supposed to make money for their parent company. And as an editor, as a writer, any aspect of the creative process with a comic book that I take on, my job is to keep it selling, not only for me, but for the parent company that's paying me, and for everybody on my team, my colorist, my letterer, everybody who depends on that paycheck. I have a responsibility to tell the best stories possible, engage the audience, and keep them interested. And yes, treat them with customer service when they contact me. These are all important aspects.
Yeah, as a reader, I'm assuming that you have at least a passing interest in Batman if you're pitching Batman. You've pitched me some Batman. Okay, so you want to write Batman because you like Batman and you like to see Batman continue, right? You're not pitching Batman because you want to use it as a tool to service your own personal message. That is an independent something that you can do in your own way to prove how there is a market for this thing. Or if you see that there's some sort of additional aspect to Batman that has not been explored and needs to be, added in or deserves to be added in, well, that's great. What is the way that you are going to maintain the trajectory that we are on where Batman never goes away and add in the thing that you want? You got to be able to do both. It has to be a balanced presentation of your artistic integrity and the things that other people are looking for in a Batman book, which you should know because you're pitching Batman and you obviously care about Batman in some fashion and want to see it continue.
It comes down to, sorry guys, hang on. There's a fire truck going by.
Uh-oh. There's a fire truck in Aaron's neighborhood. Are you good now?
I think the fire truck killed Aaron.
No, I muted. I'm like, I want you guys to have to hear that. But, it goes back to what I say, time and time again on this channel is when you walk in the door and you're pitching for the Fantastic Four, you should not come in saying, well, I've discovered a way to tell my stories using the Fantastic Four. What you should be coming in is I've sat down and I mapped out what are the best Fantastic Four stories that I can tell. What are these stories with these characters that I can tell? And then everything after that follows. So, you want to do a story that has some, socially conscious stuff. You have to figure out how to do that within the world of the Fantastic Four. And the problem that we're seeing with DC right now is in this fantastic superhero universe, that cover where they're standing there protesting climate change. And they've got the sign, there is no planet B. But there is in your universe. Yes. So when you bring these things in, you have to do it in a way that fits the universe instead of trying to make the DC universe fit our universe, because that waters it down and makes it terrible.
You got to tell that story with Animal Man because that makes sense. You got a story about climate change. Well, you go, how can I tell this story that I'm interested in telling? You go, who's a good vessel?
Swamp Thing.
Who's a good vehicle? Swamp Thing or Animal Man. They would make sense to tell this story. You don't just shoehorn it into the freaking Flash because, well, this is the opportunity I had to write, and this was the only good idea I had. That's not how it goes. You have to curb yourself and your ideas to the assignment that you've been given, to the love that people have. This is not you creating something from scratch. This is you taking something that is established. When you take something that's established, you have to honor what has come before and the reasons why people have shown up in the first place to read the stories about these characters.
And if if your brand is, you're a writer and your entire brand is your sexual identity, and every book that you work on, that's all that you're bringing to the table is stories about sexual identity. You at least have to have something interesting to say about it. You have to have an actual story to be told about it. Just coming onto a book and saying, I introduced 12 different, sexualities into this universe is not a story. What is the story there? What is that? How does that drive the characters? What does that mean ultimately? What was it that about this character that made this story compelling? And
or
if you don't
create
have any of
something new and you
Yes.
just happen to have, I personally am somebody who just loves when here is my friend. They happen to be gay, and you don't have to say that, it's in the story that they're gay or that they're black, they're Hispanic. It's great. Or here's our lead character. He happens to be Hispanic. And then here's the rest of the freaking, and it's just like everything else is, because these things don't mean anything unless you're in a world where you're a racist. If you are having thoughts that it's different when they're a different skin color or they're a different sexual orientation, you are the one with the problem. There is no different. I have freaking friends of all varieties across the spectrum. They're no different than my other friends. I don't think of them as like, those are my gay friends and these are my black friends or those are my Hispanic friends. They're just my friends. Those are my friends, all sorts of different types of friends. And they don't change how my story plays out. If the story goes like this, I love them, they love me. When something happens to me, they're worried and upset. When something happens to them, I'm worried and upset. That's it. That is how it goes when you have friends and you have loved ones. It's not about their skin color. It's not about who they're kissing. It doesn't matter. And when we make it so, I don't understand why more people in the LGBT community are not offended by how this shit is rolled out. It offends me constantly on their behalf. Meanwhile, it's like we got more black people on television. They're all depicted the same way. Every black guy has the same voice and vocal tonality. I have laughed with my black friends who are actors about how they're supposed to sound exactly the same. You can't be a black guy from Atlanta. You can't be a black guy from somewhere that doesn't have a typical black tone to your voice. Typically black. I have so many friends on Long Island who sound like they're from Long Island, but that guy can't get any work in Hollywood because their superficial idea of what a black person is does not fit with who he is. And that's the type of social justice we have. Homogenized, friggin' what's the word? Superficial inclusion. And if you want anything better than that, you have to start pushing against all of this forced homogenization of this inclusion. It's not being done the right way. If these barriers to this sort of inclusion were not there ages ago, we would have had so many more female-led movies and films led by races across the board, but there have been executives saying, no, that doesn't sell. And now those same executives have completely flipped the ship, and now they're forcing it at every turn, and they're trying to make it a big deal. So that
they'll talk crap about the customers if they don't accept it. Their weird version of whatever it is they're trying to force.
Yeah, it's not that we're not accepting. It's not that the audience is not accepting of diversity. The audience is not accepting of representation. Comic fans never had a problem with that. We've always loved Storm as the leader of the X-Men. Black woman.
Panther is one of the favorite characters in comic books, and like the reason why the movie is so great isn't because the black community came out in swells to support it. It's because he's a great, compelling character. He's a king, and he does everything based on the fact that he's a king and he has a kingdom that he has to honor, and that's why you love that character, because of the honor that is within him. Like nobody had to convince me to like the Black Panther. He's a great character, so you like him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and we, comic fans have always been really open to that. But when you come in and you are like, well, this character is now representative, and because they're representative, they can't do anything interesting, because then that would mean, if we gave them a flaw, then that would mean that we're saying that every person in this group that this character represents has a flaw. That was the problem with Rey, is that you knew Rey, once, once Last Jedi happened, you knew that there was nothing interesting that could be done with Rey, because she had become representative of a woman leading Star Wars. And so if you gave her flaws, if you had her fall to the dark side, if you did anything interesting with her, people were going to be upset. You were going to have those groups coming for your head on Twitter, or
it would have been so great though if they made her fall to the dark side. That would have been compelling. Like there's so many interesting things that can be done. These things can be handled correctly and in good fashions. And I mean, man, wouldn't it have been amazing if they kept building up Finn and he became a legit young black Jedi Knight? People who saw Attack the Block and loved that movie like I did so much. That's why we were so excited to see John Boyega in that role. We were like, man, I've seen him with a samurai sword and he's badass. Let's see it, come to fruition. And they just forgot about that conveniently, because they were focused on a different set of agenda, which was, just making Rey this kind of virtue signal of women can like Star Wars as well, which nobody ever said we couldn't. Friggin' Princess Leia is one of the strongest characters in cinema. And, it's just such a shame the way they conveniently forget, how the fans are in support of Lando Calrissian and are in support of, James Earl Jones as his voice. I know that we take off his helmet and he's a white guy underneath the thing, but, we loved James Earl Jones and deified him for being the voice of the best villain that we'd ever seen. This stuff is important to not forget and to demonize the fandom. The fandom is not the problem. It's the Ike Perlmutters who are the problem, not the fans. The fans wanted a Black Panther movie and wanted a Black Widow movie. Ike Perlmutter stopped that from happening. Those are the people who you need to point your guns at and shoot, the executives. But unfortunately, they're usually faceless and you can't find them. So instead, you look to the people who you can find. And generally speaking, you can find people who aren't as articulate as we are, who are saying some silly little thing in passing, and you're like, aha, get up. Like, man, that's not doing anything. You are not helping the world. You're making it a worse place by adding your self-righteousness and your anger into the pot and making like things are worse than they actually are. It's really disappointing.
Jesse, you have gone full Russell Brand on this one.
Hell, man, I love Russell Brand. So
no, Russell Brand, yeah, like I've been checking out his channel lately.
I love my Russell Brand.
It's funny to me, like Russell Brand's a YouTuber now. That's
he's
like a legit YouTuber.
He's so good, man. He's a legit journalist. He studies the hell out of these issues. I've been constantly impressed by him. If you don't watch Russell Brand's channel, go check it out.
Yeah, Marie said to me
make sure
the
you
other day.
check out this channel first.
Yeah,
and I'm constantly
They're on
impressed
this channel, Wes.
with Aaron. I'm impressed with Aaron and Jesse here with this conversation we've had. It got very lively and very passionate, talking about, you need to make money, but you can do that with diversity. You can do that with new people being represented, but it has to be in the form of the story. It has to add to the story. The diversity can't be the story. The representation can't be what the story is about. Otherwise, it's going to fall flat, and people are going to end up walking away. We want to do more with these characters than just present hollow husks where you can champion and say, "Hey, look, I did this." I'll let you have the last word, Aaron, and then Jesse.
All right. The bottom line is, we love comics. We want comics to succeed. We want these comic movies to succeed. We're not out here. The fan base is not out there rooting for failure until you push them to the point where you've called them so many names that they just hate your guts. And now they're like, now I hope every book you do fails because you're terrible. It's like the fan base wants these things to succeed. We have spent decades trying to convince everybody how cool comic books are. And now that people have kind of woken up to the fact that seeing these comic book movies and they're like, oh, these characters are great. You're like, yeah, we were always saying they were great. But unfortunately now the comics aren't great. The comics that they came from have been watered down and are just being churned out in this really cynical fashion without anybody thinking about what's the story here, what's the best way. Yeah, we want to tell a North Star story. Well, you know what? North Star was gay, and we knew he was gay before he came out. We all knew it, and we didn't care because North Star was an interesting character. It did not ultimately matter to us what his sexuality was. And when they came out and they told that story, people were accepting of it because, yeah, of course, he's been gay for the longest time, and now you're telling a story about it. But he's been a character before this, we've seen his triumphs, we've seen his failures, we've seen his hopes, his dreams. We've traveled this journey with him, and that becomes more interesting. In watching the Umbrella Academy on Netflix, I think I've quoted this a couple times. They eventually reveal. Now I don't know if Klaus is supposed to be bisexual or if he's supposed to be gay, but they introduce a relationship when he ends up in a homosexual relationship. When he's in a foxhole in Vietnam, he gets transported back, and he kind of falls in love with this guy through this shared experience and this shared trauma, and it's handled really, really well. And it's one of those moments, my friend turned to me and she goes, "That's how you do it." She was like, when you start the show and the first thing that a character does is have to come in and say, "My husband," to let you know that they're gay, because the writer wanted to establish that right away so that that they're not a bigot or whatever it is. Instead of revealing it naturally and telling it in a very human sort of fashion, you take away from the impact of these stories and you do a disservice to the community that you're trying to help. And I think that's probably the biggest problem that we've got here, is that you're not telling compelling stories. You're not making these characters. You're not making them live and breathe. And so ultimately what you do with them becomes empty. And it remains to be seen if they're going to do anything interesting with John Kent after this reveal, but I doubt it, because I don't think that I don't think that they really have the guts to do it.
To add to what Aaron's saying before I say my piece of just there's a lot of sort of baiting in the approach, and I think baiting the science fiction and comic book loving community is just so misguided. If you want to talk about a community that is inclusive and is open, you don't see Superman and Captain America walking around behaving in racist ways. I know as much as they want to point to like, oh, Superman's only saving white people. That's bullshit. It's bullshit. That has never been any sort of focus of anything. These heroes are saving the world. They're saving everybody. And if you're somebody who's drawn to the ideas of other people taking it upon themselves to have the courage to go out and make the world a better place, you are somebody who is interested in a world that is less racist and less discriminating. So, to put, when you kind of put they're gay or they're this race or whatever, like in front and center as the thing, it's sort of baiting. It's sort of setting it right out there in the center to see if it attracts any racists, to see if it attracts somebody who wants to discriminate against the person. And that's not the way to properly adjust people who are prone to discrimination to these new ideas. The best way to do it, and the way it should be done, is, it's not that the idea for the character is that they're a different race or they're a different, sexual orientation. It's that they are this new villain who's going to challenge this superhero or this character in a way that he's never been challenged before. And also, I think he's gay, and also he's Guatemalan, also he's Chinese. Also, he's this. Also, this is my idea. My idea is to challenge our hero like this, and the character that's going to do it also happens to be whatever it might be. That's how you do it, as an add-on to the depth of the character and to inform what the character is, not that is the character. And when the idea is, what this book needs? Not something that's compelling to challenge our hero in a new and interesting way. We need a gay character because that's going to challenge our hero in some interesting way. And it's not. It tends to be like, we're going to challenge the readers in some interesting way. The readers, like this misnomer that the readers are sitting there getting all upset because there's a gay character introduced into a book or a trans character introduced into it. That's not true. It's when the thing is changed. And when the thing is changed, everybody gets upset. The person who loves the anime hates when they make them all white people. All of us do. We hate it. Why the hell did they do that? This takes place there. This takes place in Japan, and I want to see it like I read it because that's what I know and that's what I love. I don't want to see some whitewashed version of this thing. I'd like to see it the way I loved it originally. It goes both ways. And you shouldn't switch all of a sudden when it's white people being changed and go, aha, you baby. No, I'm sorry that in the past, these asshole executives were so quick to change the races of the main characters who were ethnically diverse to a white person. That does not mean that we should do the same thing today that was wrong when we did it yesterday. It means that we should level the playing field and start honoring the source material. And if the source material says XYZ, that's what it should be. It doesn't really make sense, when Iceman's gay all of a sudden, because he was always this like kind of annoyingly straight guy. For ages, that's how he's been depicted. And it's just such a weird swerve, unless you really want to do it in a great, subtle way. At the same time, the X-Men aren't about their sexual orientation. The X-Men are about protecting the world from a place that fears them. It doesn't matter that he's gay. It's just a little side piece of the puzzle. So, there are to shoehorn in an idea for no real reason in a way that doesn't advance the story or make anything deeper or more compelling. It's just not worth our time, and it is frustrating to all aspects of the audience. And just pointing to, the white guys are upset, it really misses the point. Everybody was upset when it was the anime. Now it's the white guy. Yeah, it's an upsetting thing when you are changing source material for no good reason. Invent a new character and have that be an additional aspect to who they are, and have the new character, their primary focus be on how they're going to challenge our hero in a new way, how they're going to bring some new aspect to the story that we've never seen before. That's what we want to see in comic books. That's what we want to see in science fiction, not just arbitrary race changing and arbitrary sexual orientation changes. It's just silly.
Thank you very much to Aaron and Jesse. I really appreciate this conversation. I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, man. Have a good one.
See ya.